thank you to all of you for coming tonight. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes. And I would like just to say, first of all, to thank both David for the invitation to speak tonight, and also for basically making it possible for us to purchase this very valuable collection of the work of Michel Fingesten that, as you mentioned, I just happened in a kind of serendipitous way to find on the internet. And it is a quite extraordinary collection made of about 150 pieces. And you can see some of them on display in the museum next to this building. And I hope that you'll have a chance to see them, because again, I think the title of my talk tonight is The Life and Work of Michel Fingesten. I think there isn't much to say about the work of Fingesten because it is extraordinary. I think it is really so powerful that once you see it, you cannot forget it really. So I'm not really going to talk much about his art, but more about his life, which is quite, if you want, mysterious. I mean, there are so many details that are still in the dark. And I want to thank David also for allowing me to take my own journey. I mean, in part, again, tonight's talk, as you'll see, is a journey into, if you want, the life of Michel Fingesten, but it's also, in a sense, my own journey on the footsteps of Michel Fingesten. So there is a bit, if you want, of narcissism in it, but again, I hope you'll bear with me. I want also to make sure that even if my talk is very heavy in a way, because as we have seen, I mean, this PowerPoint presentation is so heavy, I mean, in a sense, not heavy because boring, but heavy because of the images. But I hope, again, it's not going to turn out to be too long, but I hope that you'll all stay for the end, because the end there is this extraordinary visual document that is a clip shot at the liberation of a concentration camp in which Fingesten was interned for 2 years. And this is the first time that the liberation of a camp was filmed by a British cameraman, a sergeant in the British troops, who liberated this camp. And so we'll watch about 4 minutes at the end of my presentation. So if you want, this is, in a sense, the carrot at the end. I hope that my talk is not going to be the stick, but please. But it's at least, again, it's a tragic end, but at the same time, it's also a tale of liberation, again. So if you want, again, it's a happy end, although, as you have already anticipated, Michel Fingesten didn't really enjoy his liberation that long, because he died very soon after the liberation. But I want also to say again, I am on sabbatical, and so I tried to stay away from campus as much as I could. And so I feel very guilty because I didn't come to see Julia's work beforehand, but somehow tried to imagine what her entire work was about. And so I felt that I had to make also my own connection, and I'm now very glad because in a sense, I imagined correctly what she was up to. And so that's why I wanted to start, first of all, by showing you again, some images here from the life of Carlo Levi, who was actually a member of the same organization, a co-founder of Giustizia e Libertà, Justice and Freedom, the movement of which Leone Ginsburg was also one of the founding members. And Carlo Levi is particularly relevant to the story that I'm going to tell you tonight, because he was also exiled or confined, as it was at the time called by the fascist government. The fascist regime in Italy had a policy in the first years, if you want, before, again, we got too close to the war, of basically exiling its political opponent to the south of Italy, or to islands, you know, in the Mediterranean Sea, where they could be somehow kept under watch and under control. And so this is what happened in the case of Carlo Levi, again, who was a very prominent, again, member of this organization, Giustizia e Libertà, but also a painter, that's a self-portrait you see in the center, and the writer and the physician. And Carlo Levi spent a year in this town of Agliano in southern Italy, in Basilicata, or Lucania as it was called. Here is a map of Italy. I thought that also this would be germane to, you'll see a lot of maps tonight. And so here is where he was exiled to this town of Agliano. And here you see Eboli, the town of Eboli that figures on the front cover of his book, again, this very important kind of again, a travel account of the year that Carlo Levi spent in this town of Agliano. And you see the title, Christ Stopped at Eboli. And Carlo Levi, like many of his political opponents of the Mussolini regime, was from northern Italy, from the town of Torino, here in Piedmont, like also Leone Ginzburg and Natalia Ginzburg, but they were sent again to the south. And for them was really, again, here you see like the distance. I mean, Italy is not as great as the United States or America, but you know, still there is a huge distance, spatial distance, but also cultural distance between the north and the south. And so Carlo Levi, who had never been to the south of Italy before, experienced this punishment. I mean, of course, this confinement, you know, was meant to be a punishment, but actually, during this year, Carlo Levi discovered, if you want, a part of Italy that somehow had been spared, if you want, the colonization of Christianity. That's why the title, Christ Stopped at Eboli. So there was still, if you want, a layer of Italian culture and tradition that was somehow untouched, untainted by Christianity. And so that was to him, if you want, the meaning of the deep south of Italy. But in a sense, there was a possibility for redemption. After the war, it published this book in 1945. This book became a kind of manifesto again of this new Italy born from the ashes, from the ruins of a fascist regime. And in a sense, what we'll see tonight with Michel Fingesten is a very similar itinerary. I mean, of course, Fingesten was only half Italian. His mother was from Trieste originally, but he was born actually in what at the time was the Austrian Empire. You see, these are pictures of Fingesten. This is a self-portrait, 1924, the picture taken at the same time. This is basically the peak of his career, the picture, the photograph taken in Berlin in 1924. Here you see him in 1938 again. This was taken in Milano, in Italy, where he emigrated from Germany in 1946. Yet again, another picture of him. And here I put this tentative chronology because, as I mentioned, not very much is known about his life. There is even a controversy, as you'll see, about his year of birth. But as you can read again, I'm just going to go over the main points of his life as far as we can establish. He was born in a town that at the time belonged to the Austrian Empire, in this region, Austrian Silesia, Buczkowitz, on April 18th, 1884. And his true name was Mikl Finkelstein, and the father, again, from Czech Jewish, the mother, Italian Jewish, from Trieste. And again, this plays a role in his itinerary because, as we'll see, as you can jump ahead, in 1946, he emigrated to Italy, in part because of his family ties that he had, again, because of his mother's side. What we know about his life is that he studied art in 1900. He went to Vienna, of course, the capital of the Austrian Empire, to study art. But he was a very restless young man. And it's not very clear. Apparently, there was also an unhappy love affair that forced him to leave Austria and to come to this part of the world, actually. So he came to America in 1902. And apparently, just by an imp of destiny, he was in San Francisco on the very day of his birthday, on April 18th, 1906. And he was shanghaied. Is that a term that also the kid used? Yes. That's what apparently, so he was shanghaied on a ship, and he arrived in Australia, that apparently he traveled on foot. And he managed then in 1907 to embark on a ship in Melbourne and return to Italy, to Palermo in Sicily. And from there, he walked up to Munich, where he started again to study art. But then again, he wasn't satisfied with that either, and he returned to the Far East, Hong Kong, Australia, apparently also Tasmania. Anyway, this is all, if you want, a bit of a legend. I mean, but certainly there is a great deal of Wanderlust, if you want to use a German term. But finally, he returns to Europe in 1912, and he spends some time in Paris, of course, as an artist should do. And then in 1914 settles in Berlin, of course, at the time, very much, if you want, the cultural capital of Europe, where he begins a very successful career as a graphic artist. Of course, these are very tragic, if you want. I mean, this is a good time, but also a tragic time, because, of course, the next year, the First World War will begin, and that's the time when he also gets married. And he has a daughter and a son during the war years. Fingesten, very much a pacifist, as we'll see, a number of his work very much against the war already during the First World War. But again, after the war ends, as you know, probably the period between the two wars is a very rich one in German history. The Weimar Republic is actually in a sense, again, from the ruins of the war, the greatest possibly art of the 20th century is born because of the, in a sense, excitement of this new possibility of a new Germany raising again from the ashes of the empire. And of course, as we know, that won't end too well. But in 1927, it travels to Spain. As we'll see, Fingesten is a very extraordinary artist, I believe, but not extraordinarily gifted for painting. I mean, his best work is in graphic, is in the genre, in very small, as you have seen already, if you have seen his work there. He was really probably the most gifted artist working in the small forms of the 20th century. But in painting, as you'll see, his work is not really up to comparison with the art of the greatest artists of the century. But in 1927, he travels to Spain, where he paints especially, and we'll see some of the works that he produced while in Spain. In 1929, of course, this is the year of the Great Depression. I mean, things don't go too well in Germany. He divorces from his wife too. The wife and daughter then will emigrate to Latin America. But in 1946, he and his son, who had become a sculptor, so following very much in his footsteps, they both emigrate to Italy and they settle in Milano. Milan, the, if you want, economical and cultural capital of Italy at the time. He's very successful there. He has a circle of patrons promoting his art. But of course, unfortunately, the political climate in Italy for many Jewish refugees from all over Europe also will change quite dramatically. In 1948, the so-called racial laws are implemented by the fascist regime. And so things, of course, start to change. He starts losing many of his patrons. And so he manages to ship his son to America. The son, Peter, will become actually the founder of a department of art at Pace University in New York City. He will die in the 70s, so a very successful career. But unfortunately, Michel, his father, will remain in Italy. And in 1940, of course, Italy had entered a war on the side of Hitler's Germany. He is arrested, like many Jewish refugees, and is interned first in a camp in Abruzzo, like where Leone and Natalia Ginzburg were exiled. And he spends there about a year, and then in 1941 he is transferred to a concentration camp of Ferramonte Tarsia in Calabria, even further south. And the camp is liberated then in 1943 by British troops. But unfortunately, just a few weeks after this liberation, Fingesten dies because apparently of a wound infection due to a surgery. And just a few days ago, because I've been very curious about the causes of his death, let's say the leading scholar on this entire constellation of the camp of Ferramonte wrote to me that apparently he was hit by a car. So that would be the cause of his death. But again, as many other of these facts, supposed facts, we cannot be totally sure that that's actually what happened. So, but he died and is buried in this little town of Cerisano. Now, here, this is the entire family of Michel Fingesten. You see again, 1924, his father, again, Leone, like Ginzburg, the mother Francisca, the daughter Ruth, the wife Bianca, and the son Peter in his atelier. You see clearly here, very self-assured. This is probably, again, the best moment for his life. In Berlin, he had become a very sought-after graphic artist. He was contributing to many magazines. He had a number of individual shows. And again, he was illustrating books by prominent expressionist writers. So very much at the peak of his power as an artist. But here, this is, I'm jumping ahead to the end of his life. And this is also where, in a sense, my journey intersects here with Fingesten's. These are pictures that I took. Actually, these are pictures that my wife, Françoise, took. So I am just showing you the picture, but she deserves the credit for the pictures. And so this is the inscription on his grave in this little village of Cerisano. And you see already the first discrepancy, 1883. So this is the date of birth, as we have seen, 1884. It's hard to tell. I have to confess that one of the reasons that first attracted me to Fingesten was the fact that he was born the same year as Franz Kafka. But of course, now it seems that actually he was born in April of 1884. So that nice symmetry no longer works. But as we cannot be sure about the year of his birth, also we cannot be sure about the place of his birth. I wanted just to show you that, again, I've done my homework. This is a page from the census of the Habsburg Empire from 1907. And you see that in Silesia, there are a number of towns with very similar names: Buczkowitz, Buczkowitz, Bukowina, Bukova, Buczkowicz, Buczkowice, Buczkowiec, Bukowina, Buczkowitz. So you can see, I mean, again, I hope that the program in Jewish Studies will be willing to sponsor a trip of mine to make sure that we actually find. Anyway, this is just, but just I wanted to point out that, again, as much is still very much a matter, if you want, of repetition. I mean, history is unfortunately very much a matter of repetition, and everybody has been repeating the fact that he was born in this town of Buczkowitz, but as far as I know, nobody has really tried harder to look for that. So I didn't have the time to do it this time, but I promise to do it in the future. Now, again, talking about maps, I wanted just to show you, I mean, I'm sure that you're all familiar with this, but this is a map of Europe from 1871, 1914, and you see very prominent in the center of the Austrian Empire. And the region, and here this is, again, zooming in, a map at a time. The region where Fingesten was born is Silesia, very much up at the top. I mean, again, I'm sorry I don't have one of those pointers, but if you look up very much high up is Silesia, that is very much, of course, at the border with Poland and Prussia. So it's a region that has been, over the centuries, very much a matter of, if you want, you know, many layers of different occupiers. But so, at the time when Fingesten was born, supposedly the town he was born in was part of this region Silesia. I wanted to show, talking about maps, that, again, this is an Austrian map, a German map, and the Czech map, much more colorful. So you can see that there is a difference even in maps. I mean, so, and here you can see the town of Friedeck here. This is Friedeck. This is probably where Buczkowitz is in around the town. Again, in German, also Friedeck down here somewhere. Yes, Friedeck. You see, so the German and the Czech here somehow coincide. So this is where the journey, if you want, of the life of Michel Fingesten begins. And here, these are the two camps where he unfortunately ended up spending his final years. Civitella del Tronto, up there in the Abruzzi, as you remember, like 1940 to 1941. And down here, Ferramonti in Calabria. You see, these are all the camps of internment in Italy. Again, there are terminological debates whether they should be called concentration camps. This map uses internment because, again, there is, to a certain extent, of course, a difference between the German camps and the Italian camps. They were not meant for extermination, per se. But this is something that Italian historians or Italian collective memory has very much pushed under the carpet for many years. And only very recently people have started even talking about these camps that actually Mussolini had established throughout the peninsula. But as you can see, again, farther down here, this is the camp of Ferramonti, where especially Jewish refugees were sent starting. And here you can see, again, zoom in on Ferramonti. Please keep an eye here. This town, Bisignano, is important for us. And also down here, Cosenza. Cerisano is a little village here near Cosenza where Fingesten died in a hospital because of that wound. So here we are in Calabria now. And here I'm going to show you some pictures taken at the time. You see 1941. This is a camp which was made up of 92 barracks. It was quite a large settlement. There were an average of about 900 inmates. The peak was apparently 2,700 at one point. When it was liberated in 1943, there were about 1,500 inmates. Originally, there were only Jewish refugees interned there. Again, Jews who had sought refuge in Italy. But then this camp also had political prisoners, Italian political prisoners, many Slavs, there were Chinese inmates. I mean, it became more, if you want, of a multi-ethnic camp. over the years. And this was a camp that was, as you can see, quite a large area. This was a very, even now, again, we had the opportunity to travel there. It is a very desolate area. I mean, at the time, of course, the main problem was that it was a very swampy area. So malaria was a problem. I mean, many of the inmates were affected by malaria over the time, although the conditions were not terrible in terms of food, and the conditions were, relatively speaking, again, compared to camps in Germany, of course, relatively mild. I mean, people were able to organize themselves. There was a kind of a parliament. I mean, there was a certain amount of autonomy, or certain amount of autonomy was granted to the prisoners, and the conditions again were relatively benign. But of course, again, this, as you'll see, even just looking at Fingesten's pictures, quite a change occurred between 1938 and 1942. This was one of the 3 synagogues. You see, just to show again how the conditions in the camp were relatively decent. The inmates were allowed to have to keep certain institutions. So there were 3 synagogues, there were schools, there were, again, weddings were celebrated. You know, there was an orchestra was created because, again, many of these inmates were professionally, like Fingesten. I mean, they had a professional skills, and so they somehow were able to recreate again a society. I mean, if you are familiar with the camp, of course, Theresienstadt or Theresien, and of course that was a model camp and as such promoted by the Nazis. I mean, in this case, it seems that actually the conditions were relatively, again, mild, at least for the first 2 years. Then the commandant of the camp was changed, and the conditions became actually rougher because, again, some elements of a fascist regime complained that inmates were treated too lightly. Here, this is a picture of what is now in place. Only in 2005, a museum has been established there. Unfortunately, or as it happened, all the traces of this camp were basically obliterated after the war. I mean, the camp continued to operate until the end of the war because, again, as the Allied moved up to the north, many of the inmates remained because they had nowhere to go. So the camp was officially closed in 1945, but immediately after the end of the war, basically, there was no attempt made to keep any, if you want, record of this camp. Actually, it was very much, if you want, again, shipped very conveniently under the carpet. So only in 2005, basically, as a result, again, of the work of some historians who have been trying somehow to dig up this history, a museum has been established. And as you can see here, the International Museum of Memory of Ferramonti Tarzia, that is the locality, the locale of this camp. But what you'll see, these barracks are reconstructions. I mean, nothing was actually left. Actually, a highway has been built over the location or that area of the camp. And so basically, they had to rebuild from scratch this barracks. And the paradox is that actually there is only one that has survived of the original barracks, and it is outside of the perimeter of this museum. So they actually built a kind of, you know, new barracks, but this one that is still used as a kind of, as a garage by some neighbors. So we took pictures of this just to document what is actually the only authentic remnant of this camp. But at least, again, since 2005, there is a museum in the place that is possible to visit. And this museum actually displays a number of documents, including pictures taken during the years, again, in which the camp was operating. And some of these pictures, as you can see here, I don't know if you can recognize him. This is Michel Fingesten there. This is a picture taken in 1942 of the artist in the camp. Again, there was a school for children, and Fingesten, during those years, taught art to the children. And here you see him, again, very much changed. Here you can see him even better. And here you see some of the work that he produced in this period. Again, you see he's dressed like a teacher. This man is a very interesting figure, Israel Kalk. The camp was not isolated from the external world. Actually, for instance, Israel Kalk was an engineer from Lithuania who had settled in Milano, was able to bring relief aid to the children of the camp. He traveled a number of times to Ferramonti, and he actually is our main source. These pictures, many of these pictures were taken by him. And so here you can see again how Fingesten has changed over the last few years. Especially this picture I find very poignant. I mean, this is just 4 years from the picture of 1938. You remember we saw at the beginning. And you see how, again, the conditions in the camp clearly were perhaps mild, but certainly not such not to affect the image. And you can see how, again, in just 4 years, Fingesten has changed so dramatically. These are pictures taken of his grave in this town of Cerisano, where he was buried. One of the questions that I was also pursuing going to this place was a search for the final painting by Michel Fingesten. We'll see the painting in a few minutes. One of the questions that somehow is still lingering in my mind is this, about, if you want, the relationship of Fingesten to his, again, Jewish background. I mean, was Fingesten actually a practicing Jew, or was he, again, as many people in the literature, and this is something that goes back to his son, actually. His son claimed that the family was Lutheran, had been Lutheran for generations. Fingesten himself declared to his interrogators before being interned that he was Catholic. Now, to my mind, this was a bit of maybe of a disguise. But anyway, so as you see, he's buried in the cemetery of Cerisano, next to a church. And this is a grave that was one of his patrons, one of his Italian patrons, intervened to have this grave set up for him. And actually, in 1947, this medal was sculpted by his son. So you see here a portrait of Michel Fingesten by his son Peter. And this is a picture of Peter in Berlin before they immigrated to Italy. Again, Peter, a sculptor himself. So this is somehow where the itinerary of Michel Fingesten ends. And now I'm going to talk briefly about his work. So in a sense, we have now seen a kind of overview of his life. I hope, again, I mean, I'm going fast, but I hope, again, this is not... Are there any questions already, or should we wait? Maybe we should wait until... Yes, yes. That's actually a picture from, yes, from the Jewish Museum in Berlin. So once again, you know, this is... but you see how relevant the question is, because the final painting, as we'll see, is a painting that Fingesten painted for a church in this little town of Bisignano. So that's why I wanted to introduce this question. Now, going now for a second to the question of Fingesten's art. As I pointed out, as I mentioned, and here again, the art historians among us may beg to differ or to agree with me, but certainly, again, these are paintings from this trip to Spain in 1927, and they certainly fit, if you want, in this kind of idiom of the Viennese art of the time. I mean, if you're familiar with Schiele or Klimt or Kokoschka or Feininger, I mean, this is a kind of family idiom, very recognizable here, but certainly I don't think they would justify, let's say, the claim of Fingesten as one of the prominent artists of the 20th century. It is really in the genre of the small graphic art that Fingesten really, I think, stands among the greatest of the century. And for instance, here, I wanted somehow to jump from this to the next image because of the use of color. I mean, this is, again, etching, but you see a colored etching. And it's a wonderful example, I think, both of the virtuosity and extraordinary power of Fingesten's art, but also of his humor. I mean, Fingesten is a very humorous, ironic artist. And here you see this is a card that he sent to his friends for his 50th birthday. And you can see him somehow sliding down towards his burial place. You see there his name, again, also very self-ironic. I mean, you know, this kind of monument to him. But the text is very funny because it says, you know, thank you very much to all my friends who have expressed their condolences for my 50th birthday, and kind regards to those who forgot it. And so I think, again, this is a wonderful example both of his great artistic talent, but also of his humor. Here you can see, again, these are illustrations for magazines. This is the portrait of his dancer, Tatiana Barbakov. And here, the famous writer, Leon Feuchtwanger. I mean, you can see, again, these are very powerful works. And again, he was very much sought after for this kind of work. But maybe, again, his greatest claim to fame is the incredible production of ex libris, or book plates. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this genre, or if you have ever contemplated the possibility of creating your own book plate for your own books. But there is, of course, you know, a very long tradition of book plates, especially in Central European culture. I mean, Dürer created book plates in the Renaissance. And in the 20th century, there was a kind of blossoming. I mean, you know, collectors of books also very much enjoyed commissioning book plates from artists such as Fingesten. And Fingesten is clearly, I would say, I don't think there is much of a debate on that, the greatest of all creators of book plates of the 20th century. I picked this one especially for a number of reasons, because first of all, it is an etching made with a technique that Fingesten invented. It's called allgraphy. He used aluminum plates. That was a technique nobody, as far as I know, had used before. And also because, in part, again, it shows this irony about, you know, the very idea of book collecting. I mean, you see here this man, Sebastian Malz, was actually his employer. I mean, he was a printer in Berlin, and you can see the oppression, you know, is a kind of a nightmare, you know, the nightmare of all these books piled up on his chest. And also, this is the only, if you want, slightly, how would I say, suggestive image that I'm going to show you tonight. I mean, I have to admit that Fingesten was also very much sought after because of his great talent in producing erotic images. I only show you this one that is not, I don't know if you consider this erotic or not, but it is, again, another reason why he was very much, again, very much in demand at the time. And so here you see, again, the eroticism, the irony, but also, again, if you want, the sheer beauty and again, the subtlety of his work. Now, again, to somehow connect, you know, the discourse about his art to the events of his life, you see, this is an ex libris, again, a book plate that he created for this Paolo Rothschild, who was another inmate in this camp of Civitella del Tronto. I don't know if you can see up there. Once again, also to connect this to Julia's project. Natalia Ginzburg, who was like Leone, Carlo Levi, very much a left-wing intellectual in post-World War II Italy, in 1988 wrote a very interesting article, very controversial article for the Journal of the Italian Communist Party, l'Unità, on this debate about whether Italian schools should have crucifix hanging from their wall, which is, you know, still the case, I believe. I mean, that was the case when I was a student in Italy, in public schools, because of the treaty that Mussolini had signed with the Catholic Church in 1929, and it was ratified in the Italian Constitution. So the religion of the Italian state was the Catholic religion. And so as a result, also, the display of the crucifix was very much not just tolerated, but very much enforced. And so when, of course, people started somehow to question this, Natalia Ginzburg wrote this very interesting article in which basically she came to the defense of the crucifix. So the crucifix should actually not be removed from classroom. Actually, it should be left to the if you want, to the decision of the teacher and the students together whether the crucifix is an offensive image or not. And you can see in many of these images, we'll see the crucifix figures quite prominently. And again, is it a sign somehow of an allegiance to a Christian religion on the side of Fingesten, or is it something else? And I think here, if we look at these images, very carefully, we'll see actually how the crucifix becomes in itself a very multi-layered symbol. For instance, here you see this is also an ex libris, a book plate for Fritz Kleber from the First World War, 1918, and you see there that the crucifix is actually a skeleton, so surrounded by these dancing figures, and the inscription at the top of the crucifix says, "May death die and may life blossom." And here you see also the skeleton and the woman here at the bottom. So once again, you see, like, is the crucifix a symbol of death or a symbol of life? And it returns here, for instance, these are two images that Fingesten created in 1940, a very powerful series called Marginal Observation on the Theme of War. And again, here you can see very clearly it stands against the war. Again, the irony, of course, felicitas, happiness for 1940, but at the same time, of course, the start of the war. And here there is the wish, it says, let's hope that the right cause may prevail in the end and that the evil doers may be punished in the end. And here you can see, again, the crucifix, the kind of crucifix being somehow, falling apart, the guns. And on top, there is this image of the plowman. And here, Fingesten is quoting himself. This is an engraving from the First World War, again, of a plowman, again, very much anti-war statement that he is quoting in this new series of 1940, you see at the top. And this motif returns also, again, you see, these were book plates, but at the same time, in these book plates, Fingesten is making statements about the time, and again, unfortunately, the very troubling direction in which the world is going. Quo vadis miser mundi? In which direction are you going, a poor world? And here you see once again, the plowman, the skeleton. And here at the bottom, the inscription says, "Lord, free us from the slaves of Satan." So, and here too, up there, you can see again, there is the gallows, actually. The crucifix has turned into a gallows. Very much, again, these images, of course, would need to be magnified, and each detail should be read very carefully. But again, this is really just an overview. Once again, you see, this is a book plate for himself, Ex Libris, Fingesten, 1939. And you see there, again, how complicated this imagery of the crucifix is. Of course, 1949 is a very, if you want, a turning point. Fingesten, of course, knows, the war begins in September 1939 with the occupation of Poland. But in 1938 already, of course, with a conference in Munich, basically with appeasement of Hitler, with Sudetenland, basically that part of Czechoslovakia, or the Austrian Empire, of course, after the First World War split, Czechoslovakia was created, but then again, with the Munich conference, basically Hitler was granted the right to occupy the so-called Sudetenland, where again the German population was a majority. And so you see here that actually here, this is a card for the new year, and Fingesten is basically denying his wishes. He's not giving us any good wishes for 1939. And you can see again all the skulls, clearly very cynical and desperate imagery here, as it is here too. Again, once again, the irony, felicitas, so happiness. But he says September 1939 in Milano, and he says, allow me already to wish you a happy new year. And you see the irony, of course, of him in the coffin with all the skeleton dancing on top of him. And of course, September is just after the start of the war. And here, once again, this is also an image that you can see next door, this menu for the International Conference of Peace from 1939, once again, and you can see again how, again, ironic but also tragic these images. At the same time, there is this, if you want, this humorous side. This is, I find it, again, once again, you see the coffin at the center, Fingesten, don't wait until the devil has brought me to hell. And of course, as I pointed out, in these final years, of course, we are getting close to the war. His patrons start somehow to fail him. And Fingesten, also just for sheer economic reason, starts somehow to become very desperate. This is also a card for wishing 1940, Happy New Year, optimism, even if you have a feeling to be shaven by the devil, you can see. So this is again a rather desperate, ironic image. This is a book plate for this French collector, Delage. And you see, this is a quote that comes back again and again in his images, that the only laughter that is still logical is the laughter of the skulls. And you can see again, like very powerful imagery. There is also there, you can see a crucifix at the bottom here of the right. This is a drawing from Feramonti. So Fingesten apparently lost, clearly he couldn't bring with himself all his tools, say, the tools of his craft. And so he had basically to work with very limited resources in the camp. This is a drawing. I find it very wonderful, but also very moving. You see, the inscription says, after 2 years in the concentration camp in Calabria, again, behind these withered flowers, but longing for the wide world out there. So this is from 1942 in Feramonti. And here, this is maybe, again, an image that I find really wonderful. Pegasus in the concentration camp. Again, in 1942, you can see this kind of self-portrait, and there, again, this somehow, this desperation, but also, if you want, a degree of lightness, nonetheless. Which I find, again, it seems to me like the wonderful balance. I mean, there is a lot of desperation, rage, outrage in his work, but also at the same time, a wonderful lightness. And I find this image perfectly embodies that quality of his art. Now, and here, please bear with me. We switch to my personal journey. I mean, the journey also I took with my wife, Françoise. This is the town of Bisignano that I pointed out originally, where supposedly Fingesten painted an altarpiece for a church. And so that was something that really somehow struck me. I was very curious to see this painting that has hardly ever been reproduced. And so we took a trip to this very remote part of Italy I'd never been to. And here we are. This is Bisignano, this town. And all of a sudden, things make sense. Or at least they made sense to me. You can see we just walk on the street, and what do we see? Giudecca. I mean, it's hard to say, because again, it's hidden here, of course. I mean, there is a neighborhood in Bisignano, this little town in Calabria, called Giudecca. Those of you who have been to Venezia maybe are familiar with that. There is an island called Giudecca where the Jews were relegated, so somehow the ghetto, I mean, of course, as you know, the word ghetto originated in Venice. But here in this town in Calabria, there is a Giudecca. And you see here the symbol, of course, David's star. I mean, it's still there. I mean, it's like that. As you have seen on the street, you drive up to the town and you see this. That's the first thing we saw as we were driving up. And so we thought, wow, this is extraordinary. And so up there you see the symbol of this neighborhood, the coat of arms. Actually, that's a fretboard. I believe, is that a fretboard, what you call of a guitar? A fret. These are, you see, like, that's meant to represent, again, a fretboard, fret. Anyway, that part of the guitar, so the musical instrument, guitar. And I'll explain you in a moment. This is the Giudecca, again, as it is now, a wonderful neighborhood. And as it turns out, in this town, there is a tradition of guitar makers that goes back, again, to the Renaissance. And this is very much a Jewish art. And even now, as we were there, we were lucky enough to be conducted to the lab where these guitars are created, even now by this family called the Bonis. And unfortunately, the old man of the family was very sick. So you see, the windows were all closed, so we couldn't go and visit him. But nonetheless, we were allowed to see the lab by one of his relatives, where this family creates these guitars that have 7 strings. And they are used, again, this is the man, again, one of the Bonis family. They create these wonderful instruments. They are, again, handcrafted and only given to people they like, as we were told. You cannot buy them. So basically, you must be really somehow selected. And you see here, they use, again, these incredibly old forms and tools. Here you see, again, is a panorama of this wonderful lab. Again, you can see these incredibly old instruments. But so, the Jewish, I mean, I had no idea. I had done no research before going there, but it turns out that the town of Bisignano had actually a Jewish neighborhood throughout the Middle Ages until in 1511 the Jews were expelled from Bisignano. And so this neighborhood of a Giudecca then was turned into a Christian neighborhood. The synagogue was demolished, and in place of it, this church of Saint Bartholomew, the apostle, was built. And this is the church, as you can see, and this is the church in which and for which Fingesten painted this altarpiece. So, to my mind, this is, I mean, I don't want, again, it's of course, it's a theory that I present to you here, but I am pretty sure that Fingesten knew about this, and that's why he agreed to do this painting in this church. So this is the church. Again, we were lucky enough to be allowed. The church is now closed for cult. It's not, again, you can see here there was a sign that said, you know, church closed, but actually we were allowed in by the vice mayor. You see the church? We were able, again, with a bit, I mean, it's a wonderful, again, still relatively unspoiled part of Italy, and so they were very excited to realize that there was a professor from America who wanted to see this painting. And so you see here, the vice mayor of the town came, and we couldn't take a picture of the painting because it was behind glass. You see, it's like, I mean, the church is totally abandoned. I mean, I must say, it was very scary to see this painting kept in this condition. But so he agreed to open the glass so that he could take better pictures. You see here the reflex. So he walked literally on the altar to open it. So it was a rather interesting operation. See, that was the light coming in from that window. And here you can see the chapel. Again, you see the famous American professor and the vice mayor there. And and as I was keeping him busy talking, my wife was taking these pictures. And so we were supposed to take only one picture, but actually we took a number of pictures. So that's why I'm showing you. And again, this is the painting. We are getting closer and closer. And here is the signature, Fingesten. And again, it's not, I would say, an extraordinary masterpiece, but I find it really a poignant work of art, precisely for the reasons, for the place, for the history behind it. I've done, again, a bit of iconographic investigation, and I think that probably there was a source which was painted by the Baroque painter Ribera. It seems to me that probably Fingesten had this painting in mind. But nonetheless, again, it is a rather, I don't know, it has, I think, a sheer power and force due to the, if you want, to the context rather than to the power of its own image. Sorry? Yes. And here, again, now this is just to bring, to build a bridge to the fourth, if you want, of the evening, which is, again, the clip that I announced at the beginning. This is a still from this clip. You see, like, there the inscription IWM. This is a film from the archive of the Imperial War Museum in London. So the British troops liberated the camp, and I guess that was a normal practice. There was, as we would say now, a cameraman embedded with the troops. And so they filmed the moment of the liberation of a camp, which is quite extraordinary. And we'll see Fingesten alive. I mean, I think that's a really extraordinary, I think, again, it's a quite incredible document. As you can see, I mean, I want just to point to the irony that, of course, the name is misspelled on the label in the museum, but that's just a philological detail. And now, I hope that, again, the transition to the video is going to happen. I just need to switch this, yes. Bear just with me a second if the technical aspect works. It's just going to be 4 minutes. And you'll see, oh yes, actually, before we do that, this is a description of what you're going to see, written by the very, again, cameraman who filmed it, Sergeant Hopkinson. And again, it would be very interesting because it describes, again, somehow the, you know, the context, again, of his discovery. It's a little bit hard to read, and maybe we don't have the time to do. But again, maybe afterwards, if you want, we could look at it so that we could maybe understand everything we see. Okay, let me just see if this happens. This is. Let's see what happens here. Oh, sorry. This is started here, but. Huh. Any technical supports, because I don't know here what's going on. I mean the video is here, but why don't we see it? Let's see if we can display. Should we display? Why don't we see? It was out. Oh my God! Wow, unbelievable. So, but now, how do we? Okay, is it working? Okay, yes. So it should be okay. So this is it. Yes.
Is there sound?
No, there is no sound. Yes. You'll see right away. Now there should be very self-explanatory. These are Italian soldiers basically surrendering, but should be starting now the. Oh, sorry, maybe it's not. Oh, maybe I should go a bit. I thought it was on the. Let me see. I'm sorry. So it wasn't. I'm just fast forwarding. It was not at the right spot. Sorry, just a matter of seconds. These are again clips of these are British soldiers helping the harvest with the harvest. But again, these are different episodes, but all together in one role. But now you see, as we start, yes, it should start now. It's normal speed, and you see the entrance to the camp, campo di concentrazione. So it's going to be very clear where we are. Campo di concentramento. Sorry, that's it. Yes. So you can see. So here we are distributing food rations to the inmates. These are identified as Czechoslovakian and Negro in the description. This is a German Jewish family having a meal. This is Fingesten, yes. Who is described as the world-famous painter Michel Fingesten painting in front of a crowd of watching children. And this is a wedding celebrated after the liberation of the camp. Yes. So thank you. Yes, this was the image. So there is a kind of happy ending. So again, it's very much staged, but should we? I don't know if there are any questions. Or okay, thank you. Again, there are still so many unanswered questions, but it's incredibly rewarding. I feel like it has been incredibly rewarding just to start to explore his work and life. I mean, it's so, the work is so extraordinary, but also there is something poignant. I mean, these images I find where, when we first saw them, you know, because in the museum they play this entire clip. And so all of a sudden it was there, moving in front of us, and it was really like incredibly powerful and moving. And so I certainly hope that we'll be able to increase our collection over the years, and that Fingesten will become more and more one of our guiding figures.
So the question of his conversion is, of course, one of the central questions, conversion or not, we don't know. And actually, we're going to be visiting with my high-level benefactor group an very prominent architect in Boulder, Harvey Pine, who's Austrian, and came here, and he has some paintings that somehow family was able to keep, and he claims that his family were Austrian Catholic Jews, this is what I told him, and that they were, one of the painters there was, did die, was killed in a concentration camp, and so, you know, in World War II they were identified as Jews, but there was already this, like in Austria, so much of this sort of revolt.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you think about somebody like Jean Améry, for instance, you know, is a classical example of that same kind of very ambivalent, you know, identity in a sense. But in a sense, I mean, the Jewish identity was forced upon many of them, you know, as a result. They discovered to be Jews, in a sense.
But one of the real, I mean, to look at it with him would be, where was he with this imagery before he went to Italy? Do you see what I'm saying? So versus, was this some kind of adoption of Italian culture?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, I cannot answer that. My feeling is that you're right, absolutely. Once he moves to Italy, of course, because in part as a response to the environment in which he found himself, he had also to, in a sense, adopt a kind of imagery that probably in Germany would not have been so prevalent anyway. So in a sense, it's a response, I think, to the different conditions. I think you're absolutely right. Yes.
You showed one of the crucifixion scenes was from World War I.
Yes, yes, exactly. So yes, I mean, and you know, again, the Austrian background, of course, in a sense, I mean, it would have been inescapable in a way, but...
The Jews are obsessed with the cross too.
Have you
But that's why I mentioned this article by Natalia Ginsburg, because in a sense I think she makes an incredibly strong case that actually the crucifix should be allowed in the classroom because it is not a Christian symbol any longer. It is a symbol just of suffering per se. And so that's why she can identify, even as a Jew, with a crucifix.
I mean, Chagall was obsessed with it, for example.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know if that's Patrick. Zilla first.
No, I just want to say something about the disparity, which is extraordinary, between painting and illustration. These miniatures, there's paintings, I'm sorry, I've got to say something. There's paintings for like high school paintings. I'm sorry. The later one is better, and the other work is fabulous. The disparity is just amazing.
Well, maybe that also explains why he kept going back to art school. But maybe again, he didn't need to. He didn't need to go to art school.
Is it a lack of passion if you're trying to do something in the style of? No, what is wrong?
I think certainly that's one of the problems that one should address once somebody is going to engage in writing a monograph about him. I mean, we still lack this really, there is no full-fledged study of his work. And in a sense, people have just basically acknowledged that. I mean, there is such a disparity between the two, but in a sense, nobody has really explored why that would be the case. And it could just be that he actually recognized where his actual strength was, and that's why somehow he didn't really explore the painting that much.
I don't see such a huge disparity. My question for Davide is, can you just tell us quickly about how you found this work, how you found this collection?
It was really very serendipitous, I can say, because I was looking for something else. I mean, for me, of course, it proves again the principle of the good neighbor. Like Abby Warburg's principle in organizing his library was like that you shouldn't look for the book that you're really looking for, but for the book next to it. So in a sense, I was looking just on a catalog of this bookstore because I had bought something from them, and they sent me a catalog of their entire, of all they had. And on this catalog, there was actually this collection of book plates. I mean, strangely enough, a bookstore, an antique bookstore, was selling this collection because it was mostly made up of book plates. And I guess they thought that people buying books would also buy book plates, which is a kind of non sequitur. And they had a description with biography of Fingesten. And again, that's when I saw 1883, that immediately caught my eyes. But then when I read again also the Czech, Italian Jewish connection, of course, for me, in a sense, it was very natural somehow then to start looking at it. And once I saw the first images, I immediately was hooked. I mean, I felt like this is something that we shouldn't let us escape. To be honest, again, if I had not bought a house, as I did, I would have bought this collection myself. So in a sense, I feel like I'm grateful to the program in Jewish Studies to have brought it here. It's close enough to be. But again, I would have liked to have, those images hang on my walls, but again, I have only two. I have bought 2 book plates from a different collector since, and maybe I keep buying them. And I really hope, there are still, unfortunately, again, there is a very small of very passionate collectors collecting his work. But I think in part, again, because of a small scale, there seems to be not a huge, let's say, demand on the part of institutions thus far. And that's why, again, it's great that we are now clearly on top. If you do a search on internet, you see that we are clearly on top of the competition. So I hope that we'll be able to add. I mean, that's why we have the opportunity, still we have opportunity. And again, please don't spread the word. Because we still have the opportunity to buy his work at reasonable prices. Before, I'm sure that they'll become, really extremely valuable. But I think that's why it's important that an institution like us, should have,
Where does the collection come from?
The bookstore itself thought that it was put together by an Italian collector, one of the patrons, again, Gianni Mantero, who was an architect, who is actually responsible for a grave, because he was an officer in the Italian army, and he was a very good friend of Fingesten. And clearly, he commissioned more than 90 book plates from Fingesten. So clearly, it was a very, and he wrote a number of essays on Fingesten after the war. So clearly, it could be one of the people who put this together. But my hunch is that actually it was somebody, again, Fridolf Johnson, who was the editor of this American Artist magazine, because along with the books, we also got 2 books, a monograph published in 1920 on Fingesten, and in this book there is a bookplate of Fridolf Johnson. So my feeling is that actually Fridolf Johnson was a collector. He also was a creator of bookplates in his own right, but it seems to me that at least based on this bookplate, if the book comes from a collection of Fridolf Johnson, it's also likely that this bookplate came from his collection. But I don't think that they were able to give us more information than that.
So in the most recent provenance that I actually bought them for the museum with Jewish studies money, because Davide discovered it. So we bought them from Thirsty Book. It's like a rare book dealer. The books
Yes.
have become like internet only out of the home. They used to have, my husband used to work in them when they still used to exist in New York Stalls with the books about books.
Yes,
alone.
yes. And
Now they're
yeah. And I also have to say this again, as I mentioned, the son came to America, and he was again a professor at Pace University, and apparently, sadly, he sold quite a lot of works of his father. I've actually seen recently a letter he wrote to a German collector saying, "I'm tired of selling my father's works." So I'm afraid that, maybe it may also be that at some point, actually, after his death, his entire collection was bought by an Italian collector, by the widow. And so my feeling is that also maybe over the years, again, the son, the son, again, it's a very, I must say that's another mystery, if you want, because the son seemed to me would have been in the position to promote his father's art, because again, he had the pulpit, in a sense, to do so. But he only wrote 2 very short essays immediately in the aftermath of the war, 1947, 1948. And then, as far as I know, never wrote anything else about his father. And probably, again, he preferred to sell his work to collectors. And so it seems that there are 2 also, in terms, again, of a biography, our knowledge of his life. We lack this indispensable witness. It would be his son. It seems his son would have been the person who could have filled all these gaps, but clearly he never did it when he had an opportunity, because he died in the 70s. And I think in part it was because he really was very much, forgotten. In 1998, the Jewish Museum in Prague organized probably the largest exhibition of his work, and the title was The Unknown Michel Fingesten, because actually it's true that he had basically been forgotten. And now again, because of his exhibition in Prague, maybe, but it's mostly really this kind of niche market, the book plate. It seems like, again, only if you have this particular interest for this particular genre. And it seems to me that's really sacrificing him. It should be really taken out of it. I think this is really impoverishing, his reception. It should be really valued for the great artist he was as such, not just in this particular niche of a bookplate. Yes.
Did his children have children? Might there be grandchildren who are alive?
That's one issue that we had to deal with because of the copyright issue. Yes, apparently there is a granddaughter. Again, there is a daughter of the second marriage, because the son was married twice, and so. But again, as far as we have been able to establish, they are not, in any way, interested or involved in somehow promoting, the work of their grandfather, whom they never met, actually, because again, unfortunately, as we have seen, so it may be also that his entire history was too painful to explore for the son and for the family, and so maybe that's why also it had to be, in a sense, somehow. And so, in a sense, it was too early, maybe, to somehow dig up all of this. Yes.
But this last step of provenance, which is the one we know, and the rest we still don't know, is very significant in terms of what you're saying, because this type of collection would be really in the more traditional hierarchy of a museum, an art museum, would probably be overlooked, and most museums would direct it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
Rather than, and so it's seen as some sort of paraphernalia, really.
Yes.
Book collection,
Absolutely.
but they're amazing, right? Like work of art.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's what captured my interest. So it's just a great collaboration of someone who's so interested in both art and literature, but it's ended up at an art museum,
What have you
Yeah.
done with
which is
the
quite significant in terms of repositioning.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I totally agree. But because, for instance, to mention the, as you have seen in the selection that we present, there are two book plates he created for this pharmacist from Vienna, Marco Birnholz, and these two book plates have Jewish motifs. You know, there is a David star, and so the collection of this man, Marco Birnholz, is actually at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, but they are in the special collection of the library. I mean, you know, that's also an issue where you store this material, you know.
Right, and of course, I think all of these papers collections are very important.
Mhm.
And a researcher like you could find them everywhere, but frankly, their circulation is radically different
Mhm.
in a different way. And it was also an issue with other types of material culture between whether it's considered anthropological material culture or is it considered
Mhm.
art. Of course, these are just linguistic terms, but they're very symbolic categories.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, So, I mean, I think fewer people would see them in a special collection.
Oh yes, absolutely.
It would really be a professor and his or her student.
Yes. No, that's why again it's great that we have been able to show them, and hopefully we'll be able to show all of them. I mean, at some point, you know, it would be.
Yeah, but I did it because I thought look at them as works of art. They're just unbelievably strong.
Mhm.
And this issue of whether he would have been a good painter or is one, we don't actually know. We're only seeing very little.
Yeah.
And some of the earlier ones I actually quite like. And you have to see some more like Munich schools.
Yeah.
And you have to really not, you know, and then he has total upheaval all the time. And, you know, it's much more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
The
again.
way this movie at the end is almost like, you know, that's like a, it's a, you know, a sign of some kind of status if you could even have an easel or like paint them, you know, compared to some other place.
Yeah. No, that's why again is it's a very compelling, I think, story that will have to be told. I mean, I don't know who